A lot of people may not be aware that they see a public servant or ex-public servant making a comment about superannuation or franking, and they've been fortunate enough to be on these defined benefit pensions which costs the Australian people a lot of money, Mr. Wilson said. If we are going to have a debate about super, there needs to be fair disclosure about lifetime, indexed pensions that can be worth millions of dollars. Mr Callaghan, a former senior Treasury official who led the Morrison government's retirement income review, told AFR Weekend that superannuation tax concessions overwhelmingly benefited high-income earners and should be reviewed by the Albanese government to help repair the federal budget. Treasurer Jim Chalmers said last week the government would disclose more useful analysis of what tax concessions are costing the budget and their distributional impact, while Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones has signaled the government could reconsider allowing massive superannuation balances receiving tax breaks. The Association of Superannuation Funds of Australia supports putting a $5 million limit on the amount of superannuation people can accrue and estimates the government's budget would receive a $1.5 billion annual boost from doing so for the 11,000 people with balances above the threshold. Others say the cap should be lower than $5 million. Accountant Graeme Troy said Mr. Callaghan was correct that superannuation concessions were not well targeted. A wealthy retiree couple with $10 million in super can safely generate $800,000 in annual income with little or no tax. The amount includes $240,000 in dividend imputation tax refunds. The current arrangement of allowing superannuation balances in excess of $2 million per member has created a serious lack of integrity in our taxation system, a former coalition government advisor said. If Chalmers is getting Treasury advice to force super beyond $1.7 million to be taxed again, then at the same time he should commission Treasury advice on how to implement a swingeing tax on defined benefit pensions with a capitalized value beyond a certain amount. The federal government's superannuation liabilities for retired public servants are projected to be $298 billion by 2025-26 and $523 billion by 2060. No tax is paid on contributions or earnings. Pensions in retirement for people aged over 60 are taxed at marginal rates and receive a 10% tax offset for annual amounts of up to $100,000. Surviving spouses are entitled to 67% of the pension, and surviving children aged up to 25 receive 11% of the deceased public servant's defined benefit pension. The $193 billion future fund was set up to invest to cover the future pension payments to federal public servants and strengthen the Commonwealth's financial position. Defined benefit pensions closed in 2005 for most public servants and in 2016 for military personnel. Most public servants hired since then are on defined contribution super schemes of 15.4% of their gross salary, riding the ups and downs of investment cycles similar to workers with private superannuation accounts. Judges continue to be eligible for defined benefit pensions, providing retired judges who had been in their role for at least a decade 60% of their working income as a pension, which in some cases is nearly $365,000 a year. Liberal Senator Andrew Bragg said, "The idea of providing virtually unlimited pensions is passé. The nation can't afford endless liabilities given the debt profile we face." David Knox, a retirement income expert at Mercer, said generous index-defined benefit pensions were part of the remuneration package for public servants at the time of starting employment. It's what they were promised as compensation when employed, when traditionally public servants got paid less than the private sector. More broadly, Mr. Knox said super tax concessions were overly generous for higher income earners and wealthy people. In the pension phase, the investment earnings are tax-free up to $1.7 million and above that taxed at 15%. We think something needs to be done at that top end. Mr. Knox also supports a $5 million cap on super balances. He said low-income earners didn't benefit from super tax concessions because super contributions were in effect taxed at the same rate as wages.